After a long weekend of flipping through the box scores, we are ready to argue with people who actually watch the games. Week 12 was pretty good. We had some dynamic matchups, some rookie resurgences, and some fairly disappointing showings from star players. Starting things off, we are going to highlight young Bryce Young, who had an exceptional performance against the Kansas City Chiefs. Outside of Lamar Jackson in week 1, no quarterback has thrown for more yards against this Chiefs defense than Bryce Young. He had a great performance through the air. He was hanging in the pocket. He was avoiding pressure. His footwork looked unrecognizable from what it was early in the year, and he was finding his receivers consistently over the middle, outside, wherever. He was hitting his guys. If not for a drop touchdown by Xavier Legette, God bless him, the Panthers would have won this game. They would have beat the Chiefs at home, and their season probably wouldn't look completely different. You could at least think about a playoff push, though, if they've won 3 straight with a win over one of the best teams in football. Didn't quite happen. Mahomes did his thing, scampered down the field. They got the game-winning field goal. But if you're a Panthers fan or you're a Bryce Young supporter, as I am, you've got to be encouraged by this. Putting 3 games in a row together is a great sign.
The Panthers were not that close to winning. The Chiefs were in control the entirety of the game, but that side of things, the actual result, who won, who lost, does not matter all that much unless you're the Bills. You're a little upset that you didn't slide into the 1 seed with a potential Panthers W. But on the Panthers side of things, extremely exciting if you're a Panthers fan who wants to still have faith in Bryce Young. It is shown that Canales can coach a very good offense with what Bryce Young is capable of doing. We saw some flashes of the magic he was able to do in college, where he scampered around the pocket, moved around the backfield, found an open receiver down the field. We saw him throw from the pocket with precision. He threw receivers open the entirety of the game. The only thing I think is a little bit questionable about his game is he doesn't quite have like electric zip on the ball. He's not even close to or sniffing what Justin Herbert is able to do, pushing the ball down the field. But when it comes to anticipation, throwing receivers open, making plays behind the line of scrimmage, this is the best game we've ever seen from Bryce Young. And while he'll still always have the blemish on him from the rookie year, what they gave up to get him, the Bears getting Caleb Williams, an elite number 1 receiver, in return for the Panthers getting Bryce Young, but extremely encouraging start.
You're wrong if you think that's going to follow him if he turns out to be a great quarterback. Peyton Manning broke the rookie interception records. Quarterbacks can succeed despite having a bad reputation in their first year. We don't know how good Caleb Williams is going to be. He had his first good game in the past month this week. He's not a guaranteed thing. DJ Moore does not seem happy in Chicago. Who knows how long that's going to last, if he's still going to be some transcendent number 1 receiver. And to be frank, if Xavier Legette can figure out how to catch the ball and Coker keeps progressing, they've got 2 receivers about as good as Moore. It's going to take a lot of improvement from those 2, but I can see the vision. But get the thing you started with, the Chiefs were not in firm control of this game throughout. The Panthers left 4 points on the board. They lost by 3. It took a last-second, time-expiring, game-winning field goal for the Chiefs to win. The Panthers' offense, phenomenal job. Their defense really let them down, but to act like this wasn't a back-and-forth competitive game, it was just the Chiefs won, the Panthers made it close to the end. No, that's not how that happened.
It is.
How that happened.
The Chiefs were in control. The game was never in doubt. There's no point in the game where you thought the Panthers were actually going to win. The Chiefs' offense moved the ball with ease. They didn't really have any trouble. The Panthers' offense, in a similar way, was moving the ball with ease. But when it comes down to the Chiefs, you trust them to win the game in big moments, and that's exactly what they did. They don't care about winning the game by wide margins.
You sound like an absolute blowhard saying, oh, the Chiefs are so great. They wanted to win by a last-second field goal against a 2-win Panthers team. Let's not
That's
pretend.
Not what I said.
Let's not pretend like that game wasn't competitive. Let's not just hand wave a successful Panthers performance.
I didn't hand wave it.
You're hand waving. Oh, the Chiefs were in
You're
firm
the one
control.
hand waving right
They
now.
were in firm control. They were in firm control. Come now. Let's be real. But looking at the Panthers' schedule, the playoff push seems very unlikely. But the Falcons are falling apart. The Buccaneers mega injured. The Saints are the Saints. It's not inconceivable. 8 wins. 8 wins might win that division.
They're winning 5 games in a row.
Well, they won 2 in a row, almost won 3 in a row. You never know. Look, stranger things have happened. It's the NFC South. Besides the AFC South, no division is more wide open. Is it going to happen? Probably not, but boy, that would be fun.
Something about the South, man.
There's just something about the South. Say it with me now. Since you mentioned Caleb Williams, I'm going to let you highlight his performance. I would like to point out, though, Minnesota Vikings against a good Chicago Bears defense. Very effective game offensively. Moved the ball downfield well. Their defense played very well. Up until the fourth quarter, Caleb Williams and the Bears offense had 10 points. They let it slip, had some dumb mistakes. All in all, pretty good showing. I'm confident that the Chicago Bears at Soldier Field are a lot better than most people would give them credit for. If they had made that kick against the Packers last week and not had it blocked, they would be 5-1 at home going into this game with the Vikings. Minnesota had a good performance. They're about to have a nice little home stretch. And things are going to get rough for the Bears because their next 3 games are at Detroit, at San Francisco, and at Minneapolis. But encouraging stuff from Caleb Williams. You can tell us a little bit more about that.
This version of the Bears and this version of Caleb Williams is what you wanted to see week in and week out from the beginning of the season. Anytime your quarterback has 340 yards, 2 touchdowns, another 30 yards rushing, has some incredible throws, especially the one late to DJ Moore to set up the field goal and go to overtime after that onside kick recovery, he played a phenomenal game. It seems to me that Shane Waldron was a major part of the problem when it comes to what their offense was putting out on the field. Caleb Williams is playing more free now. He's pushing the ball down the field. He doesn't seem as nervous in the pocket. He doesn't seem to be thinking as much, and he's playing a more complete game. DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, Cole Kmet, DeAndre Swift, they're being used in much more intelligent ways relative to their skill sets in the offense. Offensive line playing a little bit better. So on the offensive side of the ball, a lot better for the Bears. On the Vikings side of things, they're clearly just the overall better coach team. In the biggest moments, their defense made stops on a 4th and short, 3rd and short during regulation and overtime. They stopped the Bears right away. And their offense, once again, very good with all the talent. Big game for TJ Hawkinson, which if you're a Vikings fan, that gives you a lot of encouragement that they can have some playoff success with the game Jordan Addison had too, and TJ Hawkinson.
I mean, it was a big game for every Vikings skill player not named Justin Jefferson, and the box score was a little bit deceiving because he had about 60 yards of penalties. He had a pass interference call against him on the 1-yard line, set up a touchdown. But Jefferson, 1 catch. Everyone else, every other major skill player on the Vikings offense went in for at least 114 yards. Hawkinson, 114. Jordan Addison, best game of his season in 160s. Aaron Jones, even though he had that fumble on the 2-yard line, which kind of cost the Vikings, made that game more competitive than it should have been, he was over 150 total yards. If you are going to dedicate 2 to 3 players to take away Justin Jefferson, it is an encouraging sign to see that Sam Darnold can find his other skill players, can lean on his other elite receiving weapons, and can win you games. Another encouraging sign, Cam Robinson went down in the first half. That Vikings offensive line with Quessenberry did not completely crumble. Weren't that good, allowed more sacks from the Bears defensive line than we are used to, but still held up, allowed Darnold to have time in the pocket and really sky it out. So the Vikings, if they can get Ivan Pace and Cam Robinson back, I'm feeling pretty confident about their next few games. They're better than everyone in the NFC on their schedule besides maybe Detroit, and it's an encouraging sign. Unfortunate year for a 14-win team like the Vikings to probably not win their division.
Something that I think is kind of interesting to talk about with the Bears is it still a sure thing that Eberflus is gone at the end of the season?
Yes.
Because if their offense continues to look this good over the last few games and they get another 3-4 wins, maybe they pick up a win over the Lions. They have to play the Lions twice. Does that give any hope for Matt Eberflus?
I mean, do you dislike the Bears? I think you dislike the Bears based off that comment. Eberflus is a defensive-minded
I didn't make
coach,
a comment
and
either
they
way.
just gave up 30 points. Like, don't even float the idea of Eberflus staying around. You're going to stress test the ceiling fans and support columns of Bears fans' households if he actually does hang on for one more year. Let's be nice.
I'm not saying it should happen, but it's an interesting thought experiment to look at if Caleb Williams continues to play this well and the offense continues like this, does it get Matt Eberflus another season?
No. Anyway, what next?
Speaking of teams and coaches whose jobs may be in jeopardy, the locker room in turmoil.
There are like 3 different directions you could go with this, so I'm curious.
The New York Football Giants, they have mailed it in. They're no longer trying. Players seem to be upset with the coaching staff. They're upset with the organization. Malik Neighbors telling the media to talk to Daboll after the game as to why he's not getting the ball until the second half, making comments about the quarterback is not the reason they're losing. And while Mara has said he has told Shane, he's told Daboll that he's going to be patient, they're going to have another year to work with their quarterback. I don't really see how that's possible at this point because they have lost the locker room. With what happened at the quarterback position, with Saquon leaving the building, a player that was loved in the locker room, now is going to set records elsewhere, and now you have the best player on your offense, who's not your left tackle, who's also injured, telling the media to go talk to the coach. It seems like Daboll's losing the locker room, and I don't know how you come back from that when once again next year you're going to have a rookie quarterback, probably a lot of new players with some turnover. Schoen has failed on multiple fronts. It kind of is feeling like the Giants or Mayer is going to be forced to wipe the slate clean unless he truly does just feel that guilty about forcing Daniel Jones on the organization.
No one is forcing NFL owners to do anything. These people, in the grand scheme of things, are billionaires who only care about their own opinions on things. Granted, Mara is an incompetent stooge in terms of running football teams, so maybe he is not going to stick with his word. You look at what Schoen has done. Oh man, letting Leonard Williams go, letting Xavier McKinney go, and now he's one of the best safeties in football, letting Saquon Barkley go, even if Giants fans continue coping themselves and talking about, oh, well, Tyrone Tracy, actually not that bad. It's like 90% of the production. Come on now. Let's be serious about this. He's an incompetent GM. He doesn't have good draft. He extended Daniel Jones. There's nothing to be said about him. Joe has got to go. As for Daboll, it is really hard to get back a locker room once you have lost it the way he has. And I feel bad for him because I don't think it was his call to bench Daniel Jones or to cut Daniel Jones. It's pretty clear Jones was the best quarterback on their roster. There's a reason DeVito was on the bench. There's a reason Drew Lock was on the bench. There's a reason Tim Boyle was on the bench. And letting him go is a clear sign to the team and everyone in that building that we give up on the year. We're phoning in the remainder of the season. And when you're an NFL player who's out there strapping on a helmet and going to war, that is not something you love seeing from your front office and from your coach. So I don't know how much of that's Daboll's fault, but the locker room's gone. He's got to go. He was never that great of an offensive mind to begin with. He still has Kyle Shanahan's Coach of the Year trophy he should give back. All in all, sad state of affairs for New York. The one bright spot at the end of the tunnel, if the new GM or if Joey Boy can hit on that quarterback pick, you don't have a terrible supporting cast, assuming Evan Neal continues to play well. You have some pieces on that offense, but it's just a poverty franchise. What other way can you describe it?
I don't know. And the thing that is truly unfortunate for Daboll is that if I had to assign blame, the person most to blame is Mara, then it's Joe Schoen, and then it's Daboll.
No, then it's Daniel. It's Daniel Jones is somewhere in there too. Let's be true.
Yeah, that's true. Daniel Jones, then Daboll, but Daboll's the one who's interacting with the most players on his team daily. He's the one that has to keep the locker room together, and if they continue to lose over these last 4 games, the locker room gets worse and worse. They trust less in the offense. The Giants' offense has been bottom 3 each of the last 2 seasons. The only time it was in the top half, I think it was 15th, was his first year as a head coach with Daniel Jones healthy the entire year.
With Andrew Thomas healthy the entire year.
Andrew Thomas healthy the entire year, and Saquon healthy the entire year.
It's another concern you've got to look at. I don't want to pile on here. Andrew Thomas has been fully healthy for 2 seasons. One his rookie year where he was appalling, and then his 3rd year where he was an all-pro level tackle. Since then, injured his 2nd year, injured his 4th year, now injured this year. Do you really have much faith he is going to be able to be on the field for the Giants going forward? Because I wouldn't.
Well, that's fair too. And also with Andrew Thomas, he's been their best offensive lineman, even though injured over the last few seasons. And Joe Schoen also didn't draft him. Every other solution Schoen has tried to find has not been that great.
I'll say this in closing because we really could just keep going on. I don't even blame the GM who drafted Daniel Jones. I blame Eli and Peyton Manning for talking up Daniel Jones to that GM in the Giants pre-draft process. Your franchise's greatest quarterback is the direct cause of them drafting Daniel Jones. He didn't do anything after that. The extension is not on Eli. I don't think Eli would have extended Danny Boy, but to a certain extent, the hero of 2 Super Bowls is to blame for the current Daniel Jones debacle. How does that make you feel?
The magic about how the Giants have won games in the draft classes they wind up in when they need a quarterback, when they drafted Daniel Jones, and now heading into this season, is that they play themselves just out of the top 2 or 3 picks. And that year, Kyler Murray, really the only great option at quarterback. Then there was Daniel Jones and Dwayne Haskins after that. So
Gonna be blunt with you. I think Kyler Murray's career would have been an absolute failure if he went to New York too. Worst offensive line in the Cardinals, worst skill players besides Odell, who took off pretty shortly after. We've got the New York media who just eat him alive for the lack of desire to win, the Call of Duty stuff. I think Kyler would have failed there too. It's not really a matter of not getting a high enough pick. It's a matter of being a terrible landing spot. Like, what rookie quarterback is going to succeed from this year's or last year's draft? Like, this situation right now is worse than what Caleb Williams is dealing with. It's worse than what Drake May's dealing with. And it's certainly worse than what Bo Nix and Jaden Daniels are dealing with.
I wouldn't fully agree with Drake May because
locker rooms behind the head coach. Defense is somewhat functional. You have young players around him. Maybe the on-field talent around him is slightly better because I'd probably say Ramondre Stevenson and Tracy are even in terms of production throughout the whole year, and they've got Malik Neighbors.
Well, the Giants wouldn't have Malik Neighbors if they had Drake May.
Yeah, okay, so again,
I'd rather have Darius Slayton and Wan'Dale Robinson than whatever the
Yeah, because you're a massive Giants homer. Despite all improbable logic, you still like this team. We're done with the Giants for the time being. Can we be done with them for the rest of the season?
It depends on what happens. Someone might get fired, and we'll have to talk about them next week.
I'll make a deal with you. If someone gets fired, we can talk about them. What other reason would we have to talk about New York going forward?
Anyway, do you want to talk about your guy?
Who's my guy? I got a lot of
Will
guys.
Levis.
Will Levis. I was actually going to talk about, let's keep it in the NFC East a little bit here. Let's do Cowboys Commanders. And this game was 13-9 with 5 minutes and I believe 40 seconds left in it. What was that final score, Tristan? 34-27. This was the wildest ending of an inconsequential football game I have ever seen. There's an entire video of it on YouTube. It's 27 minutes long. I would urge you, leave this video right now. Go watch that if you've only got a set amount of time. Drop a like before you go, obviously. But watch that YouTube video to witness the chicanery and antics which took place. The offensive explosion, the special teams debacle, the idiot kicker screwing up in a way only idiot kickers know how to, and of course, an onside kick return for a touchdown. I didn't think we'd see one of those this year, I'll be honest with you. That is a rare occurrence which we were lucky enough to bear witness to. Great end of the game, very enjoyable to watch. It felt like Red Zone was just parked over there for like 20-30 minutes straight. Do we want to trash Cliff Kingsbury or no?
I don't think Cliff Kingsbury really deserves to get trashed. I think him and Jaden Daniels have been getting a little bit too much hate, and the reality of the situation is heading into the year, the Commanders had a brand new quarterback where we didn't really know what to expect. They had a brand new offensive coordinator, and there was some newness to their offense where defenses didn't really know what they were getting themselves into, and they were winning some games early. All what this Commanders team has been showing us over the last 2 weeks during these close losses is that they're more of what we thought they were heading into the season. They have a very talented young quarterback who is getting used to the NFL and still succeeding at a high level. They have some good veteran pieces on offense, but they're not super talented. They have Terry McLaurin, which once you lock him up down the field, they don't have many other options beside that at wide receiver. They have a veteran tight end in Zach Ertz who's able to make some plays, but he's not an athletic specimen or even what he used to be earlier in his career. And their defense, while it has certainly improved with Dan Quinn, they're not an extremely talented defense, and they still have to build from a roster perspective there. So while the Commanders may not make any waves this season in the playoffs, I think this season overall has shown they have a bright future with what they have going on, and I think people are hating on Kingsbury and Jaden Daniels a little too much.
Also worth noting, Brian Robinson, however you feel about him, is a massive part of that Commanders offense. He got injured after his first carry. They have now lost Austin Eckler to a scary-looking concussion. So they're going to be, presumably, without their 2 running backs for a good stretch of time now. Maybe B-Rob bounces back and is in there next week. But this offense needs its running backs to be as effective on the ground as it has been. And 3, 4, 5 man down the depth chart, it just isn't the same, plain and simple. That's another reason I think the offense is struggling. They're banged up. Jaden Daniels is injured. I'd still hold the course. Kingsbury's probably not getting a head coaching job now. I think this little 3-week skid has taken him out of that contention. But I'm not worried. 2 of those 3 losses were to 2 of the 5 best defenses in football. And losing to the Cowboys and the way they lost to the Cowboys with the injuries they had and how fluky the end of that game was, it should have been tied 27-27. Final score 34-26, by the way. Should have been a tied game late. They could have won this game in overtime if not for their kicker.
And to speak to the running back situation, combined with maybe the lack of talent at wide receiver, is when they don't have Brian Robinson and Jaden Daniels controlling the game on the ground, it makes it harder for Austin Eckler, when he's healthy, to be effective out of the backfield as a receiver and to push the ball down the field because it gets stuck with more third and longs. And when you know the other team's passing, it's easier to rush the passer and drop into zone coverage. So I think all around, they're not putting everything together right now.
But an offense which is putting everything together right now. Do I get an intro of the Titans?
You can intro the Titans.
Will Levis, much like Bryce Young, has put 3 together in a row. He has had his 3rd good game in a row. This time, it was enough to result in an explosive 32-point showing, which was enough to beat the Houston Texans. It would have been enough to comfortably beat the Houston Texans if not for a pick 6. And everyone's going to make fun of the pick 6 because it's in fashion to laugh at Will Levis right now. Aside from that throw, he was great. Surgically accurate, a big enough threat with his legs on the ground to get defense's attention, to get guys open near the line of scrimmage, and I still think he's got a shot. He is clearly a high-level physical specimen. Not quite an Anthony Richardson type guy, but clearly more polished as a passer, clearly a comparably strong arm, and while he's not there as a runner with Richardson, he's still pretty real. He is a more physically bruising quarterback than we have really seen outside of guys like Josh Allen in the NFL. If he can keep stringing these games together and the Texans just keep falling apart, there's also a real chance they somehow come out and win the division. That would take a really big collapse and a really big come up from the Titans for that to happen, but you never know. All in all, encouraging stuff from Will Levis. Touching briefly on the Titans' run defense, they kept Joe Mixon in check. Part of that's them, part of that's the Texans' offensive line. That's encouraging to see going forward. If they can just sort their secondary out and fix their offensive line, which is still bad, they will be in business.
Well, beating this somewhat limited Texans team that has been underwhelming by every stretch of the imagination all season long, it does not exactly give me confidence the Titans are going to start ripping off a winning streak.
That was a bit too ambitious, I will admit.
And compete with the AFC North wild card teams or the AFC West wild card teams.
How about the AFC South division title, man? Forget the wild card spot. I'm talking about real deal collapse from the Texans.
Which I'll get to in a second and could be possible with how they've been playing. Will Levis is a special watch. He'll throw a pick 6 that puts the Texans right back in the game, and then he'll throw a 70-yard touchdown down the field to put the Titans back up. He played at a very high level. When it comes to his job security for the future, I think with the performance like this, he played pretty solid the previous weeks. He seems to be finally showing some progress. I think he has secured his job for next season because the Titans, they're not going to have the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd overall pick. The quarterbacks available in next year's draft class, you have Shedeur Sanders, Cam Ward, Jalen Milroe.
Can I jump in on that and say quarterbacks are not going 1, 2, and 3 in this year's draft? You're off your gourd if you think Milroe, Ward, and Shedeur are going 1, 2, and 3. I'd be shocked if more than 2 of them win the top 5.
I don't necessarily think they're going 1, 2, and 3, but the Titans are at 3 wins right now. Maybe they get 2 more with how weak the AFC South is, with how many bad teams there are in the NFL. I mean, the Jaguars have 2 wins, the Raiders have 3 wins, the Giants have 2. I'm sure I could name a bunch more that don't have a lot.
Saints.
It could play out where 5, 6 wins is a 10th or 11th pick, and I think there are a lot of quarterback-needy teams that would draft quarterbacks before they get one, and I think they're going to see the performance from Will Levis and rather go receiver or offensive line.
Dear God, please, offensive line. Like, I know you want to give Lathan and Skoronski time. The center over on that right side are just terrible. Like, they're up there with the Texans with how bad they are.
The Texans, you mentioned it earlier, they may be the de facto best team in the AFC South because of how bad the AFC South is and the fact they've already gotten to 7 wins. But Joe Mixon's the only thing that's really making this offense function. CJ Stroud clearly has taken a step back. Nico Collins has had some splash plays here and there, but Bobby Slowick, who decided not to really go pursue head coaching opportunities, I don't think he's getting a head coaching opportunity after this season.
Maybe he realized he wasn't good enough to be an NFL head coach. That's why he stayed in Houston. He realized, hey, I'm going to be gone after a year and a half. I'll just keep my OC job for a few more. Thank you.
The offense has looked rough, and a lot of that's on the offensive line, but also I think some blame also goes to CJ Stroud and the coordinator.
Yeah, if I see that man on a single podcast, particularly with Micah Parsons this offseason, I'm calling it a bomb threat to the Texans stadium. There has clearly not been a level of preparation and physical readiness on that Texans team and on CJ Stroud in particular. The sophomore slump is a real thing. I'm feeling pretty good about that. I mentioned it for Stroud a little bit. Feeling pretty all right about Jordan Love, who I think still leads the league in picks despite taking a bunch of weeks off. Feeling okay about that little commentary of mine. I digress, though. Not a good state of affairs for Houston.
Likely first-round exit.
They'll probably win to get. God, they are going to get matched up against the Steelers in the first round.
They match up against the Steelers, Ravens, or Chargers.
Or the buckle up, son. That is going to be a long day for CJ Stroud. I hope it's the Ravens so he can get back-to-back exits in the playoffs from Lamar. Build a little rivalry in there. Get that hatred flowing. And speaking of Lamar Jackson, let's touch on the Monday night game. And this is going to be painful for me to do. There are two different Chargers teams we see. One where Quentin Johnson is catching the ball and being a functional part of the offense, and one where he's just not. The Chargers do not have a guy who is really super dangerous after the catch and can really stretch the field vertically. The latter Chargers team is not good. It's one of the worst offenses in football, particularly if their running game is not flowing. Johnston needs to be more consistent if he wants to stay in the NFL, keep getting targets. He was why the Chargers offense sputtered last night. He dropped a very easy first down, which prolongs the drive. He has dropped passes this year, which could have been touchdowns. And I do think he's got the ability, when he gets the ball in his hands, he can be great, but he is really struggling. He's a speedier Xavier Legette at this point. It's not great. As for the Ravens, scored 30 points against the Chargers defense. That's an impressive showing. Picked up a whole lot of fourth downs. I didn't get the exact number. They felt like they were about 24 for 25 on fourth downs last night. Impressive stuff from Henry. Impressive stuff from Lamar. And while Henry's performance was not quite enough to catch up with Saquon Barkley in terms of total yardage, still, he's a clear example of why running backs are a valuable position in the NFL and why truly great teams should prioritize getting a real pounder of the football.
Yeah, the game was not really ever close. They had a couple penalties that led to the last touchdown, which made it a little bit closer for the Chargers.
1 point game at the half. It was close. It was a competitive game.
It was not a close or competitive game. The Ravens were in control the entirety. Now, the first quarter was a little close. The Chargers started out hot. J.K. Dobbins got things going. But once Derrick Henry started running the ball consistently, 5, 6, 10 yards at a clip. He was successful the whole game, and once the Ravens started getting in a groove, there was no looking back from there. You mentioned Quentin Johnston. I think it's a little bit of an insult to Xavier Legette to compare his hands to Johnston's. Quentin Johnston, you mentioned it, the lickability is clearly there, but when they target him down the field, he kind of seems to swat at the ball when he goes up for jump balls. When he's going over the middle of the field, he looks away too early before he catches the ball and sees the ball in. So I think the story of this game between the Chargers losing and the Ravens winning is that the Ravens are just a much more talented team. The Chargers don't quite have the talent yet, but they are clearly very well coached. Jim Harbaugh has clearly turned that offense around. The defense has taken a massive step from what it was under Brandon Staley. So the Chargers' future is very bright, especially if they're able to infuse some more talent into that offense.
I think it's not been as totally bad as I just made it sound, because Johnson has that 120-yard game this year. When he finds his spots, he's dangerous downfield. He's dangerous with the ball in his hands. It's just that guy needs to show up if the Chargers want to win a playoff game. Because all due respect to Ladd McConkey, he has been very good this year. He is not enough by himself as a receiving threat to really give the job with Will Dissly on top of him as a second option.
Jalen Reagor.
It's just not going to work. Another potential draft bust out of TCU. But was Reagor out of TCU or Washington?
Well, Jalen Reagor's on the Chargers.
I know, but I'm saying, was he out of TCU or Washington? Because if he was out of TCU,
I'm pretty sure it was TCU.
They got him and Quentin Johnston on the team. That is a dynamic wide receiver tandem. Anyway, roll the outro.
That has been our reactions for Week 12. Let us know what you think down in the comments below. Will the Giants fire every member of their organization? Maybe they'll cut the rest of the roster and just have the first overall pick for the next 20 years. Like the video, subscribe, use code Thicc on Underdog. Gives you bonus cash up to $1,000, and we'll see you in the next one.